More of the Zach Gelb Show on Fox Sports 920 The Jersey.
5:16 from the Princeton Orthopedic Associates studios on this Thursday. Zach Gelb Show, Fox Sports 920 The Jersey. Number, as always, if you want to hang, 609-919-9200. Let's get into the birds, as a lot is out there about Brandon Graham. So we bring on from 97.5 The Fanatic, or you can read him at 4Phillies Sports, and that, of course, is Geoff Mosher, who's kind enough to hop on board with us right now. Jeff, appreciate a few minutes. Thanks for the time. What's happening?
Anytime for you, Zach. It's good to talk to you again. I know we've tried to line up a few times, and I've missed you, so I'm glad to be on the station.
Well, it's great to have you, and we do appreciate it. So with this Brandon Graham stuff, is it a controversy? Is it not? Who do you believe, McClain or La Canfora? Is he really holding out? Is this going to be something that lingers into the summer?
Well, first of all, it's interesting. There is the Jeff McClain report that started it all, and not only Jason La Canfora, some local writers, I think Dave Zangaro at TSN, and Mike Garafolo of NFL Network have reported differently. So when something like this happens, and I've looked into it as much as I can on my own, it tends to be somewhere in the middle, Zach. So I don't think that this is a four-alarm fire. I don't think that there's any kind of concern that Brandon Graham is not going to be here, at least not yet. I'm not getting that sense yet. But by the same token, all of a sudden he is back home, and I don't think it's just to be back home with his family when he's had the whole off season. I do think that, about a month and a half ago, maybe even longer than that, I was speaking with someone in Graham's circle just about his contract in general, because he was coming off such a, not a great year as far as only 5.5 sacks, but as you know, he led the NFL in combined sacks, hits, and hurries. So he was certainly in pretty good company as an edge rusher after last year. And I was looking at his deal, and I remember when he signed a couple of years back, he signed a deal that was more team-friendly. It wasn't a great market that year for pass rushers. So I felt like looking at his deal, he had, you could make the argument that he was underpaid, especially when Vinny Curry got that contract that makes more than him. And I checked into it, and I got the sense that the Graham camp was thinking about maybe a year down the road, like this time next year, about having a conversation about the contract, not this year. So that's why I think this might be a little bit more of a, I don't know, almost like a little bit of a test. Like, let's just see what kind of reaction this gets. Probably something agent-driven and less player-driven, but, sometimes players listen to their agents instead of vice versa. So I don't see it right now as a four-alarm fire. I just think it's a little bit of a testing phase.
And we don't know what he's asking for, and we don't know how far this thing is going. But with all that being said, that was the first year I saw Brandon Graham, and I said, wow, this guy is really making a big-time impact. That was very visible. And I know that the sack numbers weren't there, but like you were saying, he was very visibly great last year for the Philadelphia Eagles. Just to me, though, if I'm the Eagles, I would say we have you for 2 more years. You're making $6.5 million. Let's talk again next year because we want to see you do it again. I know you got to word that carefully, but that's the route I would go if I'm the Eagles.
Yeah, I think it does make sense. I think it makes sense on both ends. Even for Brandon, it's not like he's 35, right? So in some cases, I think sure, everybody would like the money when they can get it, but he feasibly could have a 10-sack year and really hold the organization's feet to the fire next offseason on an extension and maybe get even more so guaranteed money in a kind of renegotiation than he would right now. So, it goes both ways. He could also have a really bad year and make no money. But, as long as he's been pretty consistent now for a couple of years. And, again, Vinny's got to bounce back. If Vinny doesn't bounce back, and you never know what you're going to get from a rookie, at this time next year, Brandon Graham could be very, very valuable to this franchise.
How much do you think that plays a factor into it when Brandon Graham looks to his left or right, and he sees Vinny Curry, and he knows Vinny Curry, I know it's only $500,000 more this year, but he's making more money than him, and Vinny Curry's been very disappointing.
Well, you say, only $500,000 more, and you're right, that's not a lot, but it does become a little bit
hold on. It's a lot to us. It's not a lot to football players.
Listen, I would take it.
Don't get me confused. I don't want to just throw that around, only $500,000, and pretend like, I'm a big spender. I'm not.
No, I know. I'm trying to get $5 more.
Yeah.
Forget $550,000 or $500,000. But no, I think it's significant because I tweeted this the other day. If you remember when Brandon signed his deal a couple of years ago, the deal itself made him a little bit higher paid, a little more, and I think just by about $500,000, maybe $1 million, than Connor Barwin, who was coming off 14 and a half sacks. And the organization immediately turned around and said, maybe this isn't right or whatever, or they just wanted to reward Connor for such a good year that they wound up restructuring Connor's deal so that they guaranteed his Pro Bowl escalators for the remainder of the contract. So I think it was $750,000 he was going to get every year for the next 3 years, regardless of whether he made the Pro Bowl as part of that restructure. So a couple of years later, Brandon Graham is now their best pass rusher, right? They redo Vinny Curry's contract last year. He's paid more than Brandon, and they never thought to say, hey, Brandon, maybe we'll bump you up a little bit or guarantee an escalator or anything like that. So I could see if Brandon's looking at the situation like, wait a minute, how come when I signed the deal, you were so quick to make sure Barwin got a little bump up, but when Vinny signed the deal, you guys looked at me sideways like, So, again, there's a lot of pride when it comes to money and contracts and salary, and sometimes that gets in the way. And certainly Brandon might look at this as, you're paying Vinny more than me, and I've been way more productive.
With the addition of Barnett, and you have Brendan Graham coming back. I know you lose Benny Logan, but you still got Fletcher Cox, and you add in Timmy Jernigan. How do you really just evaluate this defensive line as we get ready for the 2017 season?
Well, Zach, we use the word a lot. There are two words that are very interchangeable that we use a lot, and they're almost ambiguous, and it's potential and capacity, right? Mm-hmm. This Eagles defensive line, with the addition of Chris Long, with the addition of Timmy Jernigan, who's in a system that kind of caters to his upfield style, with Derek Barnett, have the potential and the capacity to supply a lot more pressure on a quarterback than it did last year. Oh, and by the way, Fletcher Cox is still Fletcher Cox. He had 6.5 sacks, which a lot of people perceived as a down year, but that was the second most sacks of his career last year. So they certainly have a lot of guys now that you look at and say, hey, those guys can go get the quarterback, reinforcements and things like that. But, again, it's all about going out and doing it. So as much as we get excited about what they could do, we were excited last year about this defensive line and what Jim Schwartz can get out of it, and they were very iffy at times. There were great games, and then there were bad games, peaks and valleys. So I think that they've done what they could on paper to make sure that they have a pretty good rotation at both the defensive end and the defensive tackle position for guys that Jim Schwartz can use, but they have to go out and do it.
Geoff Mosher with us right now on the Zach Gelb Show, Fox Sports 920 The Jersey. One more thing on Jernigan, since we talk about potential. I had Kadri Ismail, who, of course, played for the Ravens, won a Super Bowl there, and now does their games on their radio network, tell me that Jernigan could be a poor man's Warren Sapp. He's a great talent, but not a great worker. So how do you view Jernigan specifically? Because a lot of Eagles fans are high on him.
Yeah, what does that mean? He's a poor man's Warren Sapp. Does that mean he's almost as good but not as good, or he's just not nearly as good but looks like him? I really don't even know how to quantify that. He's right now a defensive tackle who has shown you spurts of being pretty good and has shown you spurts of kind of checking out and not being there. And that's why when it came time for the Ravens to decide which defensive tackle they wanted to pay, they paid Brandon Williams and shipped Jernigan off for some draft compensation. So I think sometimes, teams get new players and they kind of have this name. Florida State, he was a guy who was considered a first-round type of prospect when he came out, although I think he went in the second round, right? So everybody's like, oh, this system is going to work. He's going to be a Jim Schwartz guy. He's going to get 10 sacks. He's one of those guys where, much like a lot of people on this team with 1 year left on their deal or under a 1-year deal, it's a prove-it year. He's really got to get out there and show that he can be a more complete defensive tackle and that in this system he could be a pass-rushing DT who can get you maybe 7 to 9 to 10 sacks instead of 5 to 6.
Geoff Mosher with us. Hey, Jeff, let's get a transition over to the offensive side of the ball. Wide receivers, we know they brought in Alshon Jeffrey. We know we brought in Torrey Smith as well, Howie Roseman did in this offseason to address some of the issues on the short term. We'll see how long it does last. But with the wide receivers and also what they got in the draft, where's your confidence level in the group of wide receivers?
I think it's a really interesting set of wide receivers, Zach. And what I really think they're going to be so much better at, as opposed to this time last year or last season, is making plays downfield, specifically against coverage. Last year, it didn't even matter, covered or uncovered. They were either dropping passes or they just weren't getting open. This year, when you put Alshon Jeffrey, who, in my opinion, is probably the best jump ball receiver in the league, best 50-50 ball receiver, he makes a lot. That's where he makes his money. So I think that, combined with Torrey Smith, combined with the two kids that they drafted who are known for making plays down the field in college, gives them a really good vertical strike ability. And Carson Wentz likes to put the ball downfield in the air. Now, he had trouble doing it last year. He threw some interceptions. Maybe some of those balls that tended to sail last year, he's either A, corrected with footwork and mechanics this offseason, or B, they're just snatched out of the air by Alshon Jeffrey, unlike what Nelson Aguilar could never do. If you think about that Detroit game, right, and Carson throws that pick where he's trying to hit Aguilar and it gets picked off by Slay, and Aguilar barely makes a play on it. If that's Alshon Jeffrey, it could be a completely different story. So I think from a downfield vertical strike, what Doug Peterson wants to do most, I think he improved. Where I really think they might be deficient offensively, along with the obvious, is that they could use another running back. But this game is won. Most NFL games are won on third down, 3rd and 5, 3rd and 6. The team that usually converts those the most will win the most games usually, especially those tight defensive games, right? The teams that have the highest third down conversion are usually your best teams. I don't know that they have a guy on 3rd and 4, 3rd and 5 when the defense is sending 7 men and the quarterback's got to get the ball out hot, and you need a receiver to explode out of his breaks and either cut to the sideline and make a fingertips catch there at the sticks, or cut to the middle and make a catch in between a corner and a safety. That's Alshon Jeffrey has not proven to be that guy yet. That's like an Antonio Brown, Odell Beckham, even like a Jamison Crowder, slot receiver in Washington, right? I don't see that yet, say, out of Matthews and Ertz, where they're so explosive and get out of their break so quickly on a 3rd and short with the defense coming down on you, that they do that. So I'll be interested to see on what kind of third down team this is and third down offense. I think that might be an area that they're a little deficient in still.
We know how poor the wide receivers were last year, and even calling them poor is a big-time understatement because the wide receivers last year were awful. Assuming Jeffrey can stay healthy, and that's a big if, he'll probably be a 1,000-yard receiver, judging by what he's done in his career. Is it possible this year, with Jeffrey being one of them, that we could possibly see 2 1,000-yard receivers on the Eagles?
If it is
Matthews, right?
It's either Matthews or Ertz. And I don't know if it's possible because Matthews being with 1 year left and them drafting 2 wide receivers, specifically one, the kid from West Virginia who kind
Gibson.
of might be a slot guy to start. I know he's a downfield guy, but he's not especially fast. He just has a knack for tracking the ball down back in the field. Those guys I think are going to get a chance to play because those really are the future. And if Jordan Matthews isn't really the future and they're not going to sign him to an extension, he might see his snaps curtailed a little bit. So I would say Ertz maybe, but I can't. He's had some. Last 2 years I think he's been top 5 top 5 in tight end receiving, but not a 1,000-yard receiver guy. I would say no. I don't think they're going to have 2,000-yard receiving guys. I think they'll have Alshon being a 1,000-yard guy if he stays healthy, and a couple of guys in the 800 or 900 range. But I'd be surprised if 2 guys reach 1,000 yards on this team.
Your 5 receivers, and we'll see who the 6 is going to be. And I know it's not in that order necessarily, but you have Alshon, Torrey Smith, Matthews, Hollins, and Gibson being the rookies. The 6 and that 6 receiver, even though it may not be physically the 6 on the depth chart, is it an Nelson Aguilar, or do you see maybe Aguilar getting cut this year? I know it probably doesn't make sense to cut him because of the contract.
I think it's yet to be determined. I really do believe that Aguilar is going to be the leader in the clubhouse going into camp because it costs a lot to cut him. So you might, if you're gonna have to pay a lot of money, you might as well try to have him on team to get something out of him. He can still be a returner on special teams for you. You need special teams out of your last wide receiver spot, and DGB gives you none of it, and I don't think Trent gives you any of it. I'm not sure if Turner does. So I would say Aguilar still stands the best shot to make the team. However, they're starting a new culture here. You can tell by the way they drafted that they're really looking for kids who are devoted to football, passionate about football, no-nonsense type of guys. If, for whatever reason, Aguilar, they don't feel he has his head on straight, and the drops continue, the mental mishaps continue, and they don't want that to be, something that permeates in the locker room, and they just feel that the kid needs a different environment and he'll never get it. Maybe they suck it up, take the financial hit to clear that spot for somebody else who may have had a better camp and is more deserving and maybe just fits in with the culture that they got going on better. but we're a long way from there. But I can see that scenario happening if they just feel that Nelson's a lost cause. You don't want to keep a guy like that around dragging down the locker room.
How do you grade this offseason for one Howie Roseman?
I've been very, very, very critical of Howie in his off seasons and his roster assembly in the past. So when I say this, I'm certainly not a homer, but I applaud it. One of the biggest things I said this off season after the end of the year is I said they need to get younger, more dynamic, and they need to stop handing out free agent contracts in the 4 or 5, 6 years. They need to be a draft and develop team. And the one way you do that, but still maintain to be competitive, is by signing veterans to one-year deals. I love signing veterans to one-year deals, and that's basically what they went out and did. Signed everybody to a one-year deal, including Alshon Jeffrey, who I didn't believe they should sign for 4 or 5 years. I could live with on the one-year deal, prove it. If it works well, you can retain him under a price maybe you guys you negotiate on. If not, you leave. Maybe you get a great compensatory pick. Who knows? But the bottom line is every signing that they made in free agency didn't preclude them from drafting at a certain position, and I do like their draft. The only thing that I looked at a little sideways was Sidney Jones in the second round. I understand their side of the story. My viewpoint is that's for where they're at, that's a really big risk. It's a risk anytime you draft a cornerback first or second round because those guys are so hit or miss to begin with. And then you factor in that you put an Achilles injury on top of it. That's pretty tough. But I know that they felt that there was great value in getting him there, and we'll see what happens with that. But that would be my only real criticism of their moves.
With all that being said, and I know there's still some moving pieces to happen, but knowing pretty much what you think the roster is going to be with what you have right now, give me the low point, give me the high point of what you think this team could be this year.
Well, I still think, their high point is probably 9. I mean, listen, if the ball, crazy thing, if the ball really bounces their way, maybe they get to 10. I really think that's very, very unlikely. I think even 9 is an optimistic outlook because I really think their schedule is very, very difficult. It starts off difficult with those road trips to Kansas City and their home games against Washington start off with, and then it ends difficult with some rough games in there. So I still think, to me, they look like a 7 or 8 win team realistically. I don't think any worse than 7, but I don't. I'd be surprised if it was anything more than 9.
Where's your confidence in Doug, by the way, as we get ready to enter your number 2 with him?
Yeah, I would have liked to have heard Doug Peterson say that he was going to give up the play calling, focus on, just being an overall head coach, and he's not. So he, to me, tends to – I think he's got a lot on his plate, and I think that whether he admits it or not, factors into some of his iffy decisions. So I wish he would have given it up. So, but I'm not completely lost on him. I don't know. To be honest, I'm not guaranteeing that he's going to be the coach after this year either. I just think that he's got to really – it's as much as we talk about Carson Wentz and his improvement, it's got to be on Doug's end too.
Well, let me ask you this, because I've been critical of Doug, and I have to understand the roster was not great last year. I didn't think that team was going to be really good, and you got what you got at 7-9. But with Doug, everyone points out some of the bad decisions where he looked very foolish, like against the Giants, against the Cowboys, simple things, even the Packers with that 2-yard challenge, which I thought was an inane challenge. I've been asking this question for a while, and I haven't really got a great answer from anybody, so maybe you could give us a little bit more clarity. What does he do specifically that could show that, hey, this guy could be a good head coach one day?
What does he need to do? Is that what you're asking?
What does he do? What does he need to do to show that, hey, that this guy has a good pulse on the team and that he could be a good head coach?
Well, okay. First, you just laid it out some of there. I think some of the very strange decisions, the fourth down, here's what he needs to do, Zach. He really needs to be consistent with who he is. One day he's loving on a player who gets in trouble, and the next day he's calling out. Remember the press conference a couple of weeks later where he said, well, hey, jobs are on the line.
Yeah.
And the team wasn't even eliminated from the playoffs yet. So that was, you're being somebody one day and another guy the next day. And then the same thing with, you're going for it on fourth down all the time in one game. And then the time when you should be doing it against Dallas on the opening drive, when you're deep in their territory, you're taking the points instead of going for it. So you are inconsistent there, too. I think the biggest thing for him is to be the same person. That's what Andy Reid was great at, through thick and through thin. You are who you are. You don't deviate. And again, I think giving up the play calling would have helped him do that. It would help him focus in on who he wants to be overall and be a leader instead of more of an offensive-minded coach. But I just think I don't have as much issue with like the play design or the play calling, so to speak, as I do the decision making. I just think his decision-making needs to be more consistent.
And he's got to improve on that this year. Hey, Geoff, before we let you run, last one with Carson Wentz, since we'll finally bring up the quarterback at this point of the conversation, because so many people just think that he's going to be the real deal, and I'm in agreement with that. To you, what's a successful season statistically this year for one Carson Wentz?
Statistically, what do you have, like 3,800 yards last year? So I don't think 4,000 yards is out of the question, especially knowing that Doug Peterson's probably going to throw the ball again 65% of the time. Throw 30 some odd touchdowns and keep your picks under 14, and I think that'll be pretty good.
Geoff, great stuff. We appreciate it. Thanks so much.
You got it, Zach. Thanks for having me on. Always appreciate it.
Always fun to talk to Geoff Mosher. Of course, you can hear him on 97.5 The Fanatic, and also read him at 4 Phyllis Sports as well. So that's good stuff there with Geoff Mosher. Here's my thing with Doug. And I'm the same person basically as Geoff when it comes to Howie Roseman. I don't love Howie Roseman, but what he did this offseason, you have to applaud it. I like the work that he did this offseason, Howie Roseman. But with Doug, and maybe I'm being too critical about it, maybe he took a few extra risks in year number one because he knew the team wasn't that good. But what does he do well? Like, what are his strengths? And to me, I need to see whatever those strengths are in year number two. Because year number one, and I hate to play into the narrative that he's clueless and all that, because you don't become an NFL head coach by being clueless. But I don't think he's ready for this moment yet. And now it could still work because you have the quarterback and you need to surround the quarterback with the right pieces. So if Howie and Joe, they give you the right pieces, it could still work. But the decision-making in year number one on a lot of things were brutal. The 2 play calls going on 4th down versus the Giants, brutal. The decision versus the Cowboys not to take the field goal and to punt the football, brutal. On a named 2-yard challenge against the Packers on Monday Night Football with the entire nation watching, brutal. What does he do well? And are we going to see him do things that are above satisfactory level this year? That I don't know. The coach, I still believe, is a big, ambiguous part of this. I don't know what to expect from Doug Peterson. And sometimes when he's in these press conferences, and you can see that's why they have him speak less and less and less, he changes his tune from time to time. Or he'll just give you too much. Like, you could be a little Belichick-like. You could give some short answers. You don't got to be Todd Bowles where you be dry and boring and give you nothing and don't win anything. But you got to find that middle ground when it comes to dealing with the media. And this is a talk show host telling you that. Like last year, he would give us some gold material because he would just bloviate. But with Doug Peterson, what are those things that he does really well? So far, haven't seen a lot. And it's only year number one, and now you're on year number two. You need to see an improvement because I say this all the time. And everyone, I know some people just call it a fantasy. But if Harbaugh misses the playoffs this year with the Ravens, that would be the 3rd consecutive year he misses the playoffs. If he misses the playoffs 3 consecutive years, I think it would be a colossal mistake on the Ravens' part because Harbaugh's a very good coach. But if Harbaugh becomes a free agent with his ties to Philly, where's your loyalty to Doug Peterson? You say goodbye to Doug Peterson. Even though I'm someone that says give a coach 3 years, if Harbaugh is the alternative, and let's say this year they go 8-8, and Doug continues to make some questionable decisions, and Harbaugh becomes available, you'll see every fan in Philadelphia will be begging. They'll be imploring if Harbaugh becomes available to get him. Heck, even last year, which I thought was just ridiculous, people saying, oh, let's try to get Harbaugh if he becomes available after 1 year. To me, you can't fire a coach after 1 year, but after 2, if you don't have a lot of confidence and Harbaugh becomes available, then yeah, that's going to be something in play next year. Now, he could erase that thought process just by winning 10 games and going to the playoffs, but that's going to be tough to do. For me, the range on the Eagles, I think it's like 8 to 9. Like the low point, I could see them going the same as last year and getting 7 wins. I could see there being a 1-win improvement, a 2-win improvement, and maybe at most just because we went through the schedule and the schedule is not as brutal as some people think it is. But yeah, they could possibly get 10 if they have everything go their way. But to me, it's probably 8 or 9 wins. But we got some more time to number crunch and figure out what the exact number will be. 609-9199-D200. Zach Gelb Show, Fox Sports 920 The Jersey. 5:40 is the time. We're taking one more break. We're coming back right after this, right here on Fox Sports 920 The Jersey or 920thejersey.com. We'll be back with more sports talk right after this.